Question 1. Market research demonstrates that many clients approaching retirement in Ontario, Canada, seek investments that offer a balance of security and potential for moderate growth. An advisor is meeting with a prospective client who has expressed a desire for a safe investment to fund their retirement, mentioning a general target for income generation. The advisor has identified 3 potential investment products: a high-commission mutual fund that broadly fits the client's stated goals, a more aggressive fund with higher potential returns but also higher risk, and a conservative bond fund that offers lower but more predictable income. Considering the regulatory landscape in Ontario, which approach best serves the client's interests and adheres to professional standards? Option A. Recommend the mutual fund with the highest commission, as it broadly aligns with the client's stated retirement goals and offers a potential for income generation. Option B. Suggest the more aggressive fund, highlighting its potential for higher returns, and explain that some risk is necessary for growth, even if it exceeds the client's stated comfort level. Option C. Thoroughly assess the client's complete financial picture, including their specific income needs, time horizon, and precise risk tolerance, before recommending the most suitable investment product, even if it means foregoing a higher commission. Option D. Focus exclusively on the client's desire for a safe investment and recommend the conservative bond fund without further exploration of their broader financial situation or other potentially suitable options. Correct answer is C. Thoroughly assess the client's complete financial picture, including their specific income needs, time horizon, and precise risk tolerance, before recommending the most suitable investment product, even if it means foregoing a higher commission. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a client with the regulatory obligations of a financial advisor. The advisor must navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure that advice provided is solely in the client's best interest, adhering strictly to the regulatory framework governing financial advice in Ontario, Canada. The pressure to secure a sale can create an ethical dilemma, demanding careful judgment to uphold professional integrity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing the client's stated financial goals and risk tolerance above all else. This approach necessitates a thorough understanding of the client's current financial situation, their objectives for retirement, and their capacity to absorb risk. The advisor must then identify investment products that align with these factors, even if those products offer lower commissions or are not the advisor's preferred offerings. This is correct because Ontario's regulatory framework, particularly under the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario, FSRA, mandates that advisors act in the best interest of their clients. This includes a duty of care, a duty to act honestly and in good faith, and the obligation to provide advice that is suitable for the client's circumstances. Recommending a product that is not the most suitable, even if it meets the client's basic needs, violates these core principles. Incorrect approach is analysis. Recommending the mutual fund with the highest commission, even if it broadly aligns with the client's retirement goals, is professionally unacceptable. This approach prioritizes the advisor's financial gain over the client's best interest, creating a clear conflict of interest and violating the duty to act honestly and in good faith. Such an action could lead to regulatory sanctions, including fines and license suspension, and damage the client's trust and financial well-being. Suggesting a product that is more aggressive than the client's stated risk tolerance, even if it has the potential for higher returns, is also professionally unacceptable. This fails to adequately assess and respect the client's risk profile, potentially exposing them to losses they are not prepared to handle. Ontario regulations require advisors to conduct a thorough suitability assessment, and recommending an overly aggressive product disregards this crucial step, potentially leading to significant financial harm for the client and regulatory repercussions for the advisor. Focusing solely on the client's stated desire for a safe investment without exploring their broader financial picture or understanding the nuances of different safe options is professionally inadequate. While safety is important, a comprehensive understanding of the client's overall financial situation, including their time horizon, liquidity needs, and other assets, is essential for providing truly suitable advice. This approach risks offering a solution that is overly conservative, potentially hindering the client's ability to meet their long-term retirement goals due to insufficient growth. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive client discovery phase. This involves active listening to understand not only stated needs, but also underlying concerns and objectives. Following this, a thorough analysis of the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and time horizon must be conducted. The advisor then identifies a range of suitable options that meet regulatory requirements and align with the client's best interests. Finally, the advisor presents these options transparently, explaining the pros and cons of each, allowing the client to make an informed decision. This process ensures that advice is always client-centric and compliant with regulatory obligations. Question 2. Market research demonstrates that clients often seek financial advice that aligns with their long-term financial aspirations. In Ontario, a financial advisor is meeting with a new client who expresses a desire for stable, moderate growth and a low tolerance for risk. The advisor has identified two investment products. Product A, which offers a moderate potential return with low risk and a standard commission, and Product B, which offers a higher potential return but carries a significantly higher risk profile and a substantially higher commission for the advisor. The client has indicated they are looking for a safe bet to supplement their retirement savings. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical obligations for a financial advisor operating in Ontario? Option A. Recommend Product B, emphasizing its higher potential return and framing it as a way to accelerate retirement savings while downplaying the associated risks. Option B. Recommend product but fail to fully disclose the commission structure, assuming the client would prefer a lower commission product. Option C. Recommend Product B, highlighting the higher commission as an indicator of the product's superior value and potential for the client. Option D. Recommend Product A, thoroughly explaining its features, benefits, and how it aligns with the client's stated goals of stable, moderate growth and low risk tolerance, while also disclosing the commission structure. The correct answer is D. Recommend Product A, thoroughly explaining its features, benefits, and how it aligns with the client's stated goals of stable, moderate growth and low risk tolerance, while also disclosing the commission structure. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a client with the overarching regulatory obligations of the financial services industry in Ontario. The advisor must navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure that advice provided is suitable and in the client's best interest, adhering strictly to the Ontario Securities Commission (OSC) regulations. The pressure to meet sales targets or retain a client can create an environment where ethical boundaries are tested, demanding a robust decision-making process grounded in regulatory compliance and client centricity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing the client's stated financial goals and risk tolerance, even if it means recommending a product that generates lower immediate compensation for the advisor. This approach aligns with the OSC's client-focused conduct rules, which mandate that registrants must act honestly, fairly, and in the best interests of their clients. By thoroughly understanding the client's situation and recommending the most suitable investment, the advisor upholds their fiduciary duty and regulatory obligations, fostering long-term trust and compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Recommending a product solely because it offers a higher commission, without a thorough assessment of its suitability for the client's specific circumstances, violates the OSC's best interest standard. This prioritizes the advisor's financial gain over the client's well-being, constituting a serious ethical and regulatory breach. Similarly, pressuring the client to invest in a product that doesn't align with their stated risk tolerance or financial objectives, even if presented as a limited-time opportunity, is a form of misrepresentation and undue influence, contravening OSC regulations designed to protect investors from unsuitable recommendations. Finally, failing to adequately disclose the commission structure or potential conflicts of interest associated with a particular product is a breach of transparency requirements, preventing the client from making a fully informed decision. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the client's needs, objectives, and risk profile. This should be followed by a diligent review of available investment products, assessing their suitability against the client's profile and regulatory requirements. Any potential conflicts of interest must be identified and disclosed transparently. The ultimate decision should always be driven by what is demonstrably in the client's best interest, irrespective of personal compensation or sales targets, ensuring adherence to the OSC's regulatory framework. Question 3. Market research demonstrates that clients experiencing recent financial setbacks may seek rapid recovery strategies. In Ontario, Canada, a financial advisor is approached by a client who has recently incurred significant investment losses and is now eager to invest in a high-growth, speculative fund that has shown strong past performance, hoping to quickly recoup their losses. The client expresses a strong desire to proceed immediately. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical obligations for financial advisors in Ontario? Option A. Advise the client to invest a significant portion of their remaining capital into the speculative fund, emphasizing its past performance as a strong indicator of future returns, to accelerate their recovery. Option B. Recommend a different high-growth fund that the advisor believes might offer a faster recovery, without a full suitability assessment to satisfy the client's immediate need. Option C. Conduct a thorough suitability assessment to understand the client's current financial situation, risk tolerance, investment objectives, and knowledge before recommending any investment, even if it means delaying the client's desired immediate action. Option D. Proceed with the investment in the speculative fund as requested by the client, given their expressed urgency and desire to recover losses quickly. Correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough suitability assessment to understand the client's current financial situation, risk tolerance, investment objectives, and knowledge before recommending any investment, even if it means delaying the client's desired immediate action. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a client with the regulatory obligations of a financial advisor. The client's desire for a quick, potentially risky investment, coupled with their emotional state due to recent financial losses, necessitates careful judgment. The advisor must navigate the client's urgency and emotional influence while adhering to the strict regulatory framework governing financial advice in Ontario, Canada. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough understanding of the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives, as mandated by the Ontario Securities Commission, OSC, rules, and the Investment Industry Regulatory Organization of Canada, IIROC, dealer member rules. This approach prioritizes a comprehensive suitability assessment before recommending any investment. It involves gathering detailed information about the client's financial position, investment knowledge, and experience, as well as their risk tolerance and investment objectives. This ensures that any recommendation aligns with the client's best interests and regulatory requirements, preventing unsuitable recommendations that could lead to further financial harm or regulatory breaches. Incorrect approaches analysis. Recommending an investment solely based on the client's expressed desire for a quick recovery, without a full suitability assessment, violates the OSC's client-focused market conduct rules and IIROC suitability obligations. This approach disregards the potential for the investment to be inappropriate for the client's circumstances and could exacerbate their financial difficulties. Proceeding with the investment based on the client's emotional state and past performance of a specific fund, without verifying its suitability, also fails to meet regulatory standards. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to act in the client's best interest, potentially leading to regulatory sanctions and reputational damage. Finally, suggesting a high-risk, speculative investment who make up for lost time, without a proper assessment of the client's capacity to absorb such risk, is a direct contravention of the principles of responsible financial advice and regulatory oversight. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive client discovery phase. This involves active listening to understand the client's stated needs and underlying concerns, followed by a detailed fact-finding process to establish their financial profile and objectives. Regulatory requirements, such as those set by the OSC and IIROC, must then be applied to evaluate the suitability of any proposed course of action. A critical step is to document the entire process, including the rationale for any recommendations made, to demonstrate compliance and protect both the client and the advisor. Question 4. The performance metrics show a consistent pattern of minor errors in hazard perception during the Kilkenny driver test for several candidates. Considering the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and the Ministry of Transportation's testing protocols, Which of the following represents the most professional and ethically sound approach for the test administrator? Option A. Recommend an immediate retest for all candidates with hazard perception errors, without a detailed analysis of the specific errors or their underlying causes, to ensure a more thorough evaluation. Option B. Immediately fail any candidate exhibiting a pattern of hazard perception errors, regardless of the severity or potential external influences, as this indicates a fundamental lack of readiness for driving on Ontario roads. Option C. Base the final assessment primarily on the examiner's subjective impression of the candidate's overall driving confidence and assertiveness, rather than solely on the recorded error metrics. Option D. Review the specific nature and frequency of each candidate's hazard perception errors, cross-referencing them with the established provincial criteria for safe driving, and consider any documented extenuating circumstances before making a final assessment. The correct answer is D. Review the specific nature and frequency of each candidate's hazard perception errors, cross-referencing them with the established provincial criteria for safe driving, and consider any documented extenuating circumstances before making a final assessment. Explanation. The performance metrics show a concerning trend in driver error rates during the Kilkenny driver test, particularly in relation to hazard perception and adherence to provincial traffic laws. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the test administrator to balance the need for objective assessment with the potential impact of external factors on candidate performance, while strictly adhering to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and the Ministry of Transportation's testing protocols. A nuanced understanding of driver psychology and the specific requirements of the Ontario licensing framework is essential. The best approach involves a thorough review of the individual candidate's performance data against established provincial standards, considering any documented extenuating circumstances that may have influenced their test. This approach is correct because it prioritizes objective evaluation based on the Ontario Highway Traffic Act's requirements for safe driving and the Ministry of Transportation's established testing procedures. It ensures that decisions are grounded in evidence and provincial regulations, preventing arbitrary judgments. Ethical considerations of fairness and due process are upheld by giving due weight to all relevant performance indicators and contextual information. An approach that solely focuses on the raw performance metrics without considering potential mitigating factors is professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge that external circumstances, such as sudden illness or a documented disability, can temporarily impair a candidate's ability to perform optimally, even if they possess the underlying skills. This approach risks an unfair assessment and could lead to a candidate being denied a license despite possessing the necessary competencies under normal conditions, violating principles of fairness and potentially contravening the spirit of the Highway Traffic Act's intent to license competent drivers. Another unacceptable approach is to make a subjective judgment based on the examiner's personal impression of the candidate's demeanor or perceived confidence level, rather than on objective performance data and adherence to provincial traffic laws. This introduces bias and deviates from the standardized, evidence-based assessment mandated by the Ministry of Transportation. It is ethically unsound as it moves away from objective criteria and can lead to discriminatory outcomes, undermining the integrity of the testing process. Finally, an approach that immediately suggests retesting without a detailed analysis of the specific errors and their potential causes is also professionally deficient. While retesting may be necessary, it should be a consequence of a comprehensive review, not a default reaction. This approach bypasses the critical step of understanding why the errors occurred, which is crucial for both fair assessment and identifying areas for potential improvement, thereby failing to fully serve the public interest in ensuring safe drivers on Ontario's roads. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the relevant provincial regulations, Ontario Highway Traffic Act, and testing standards. This is followed by a meticulous review of all objective performance data. Next, any documented extenuating circumstances should be considered. The decision should then be made based on whether the candidate has met the provincial standards for safe driving, taking into account all gathered information and ensuring fairness and due process. Question 5. The audit findings indicate that a Kilkenny-based approved driving instructor, Addy, has a close personal relationship with a senior examiner at the local driving test center. This relationship is not known to the ADI's current learner drivers. Considering the regulatory framework for driver instruction in Ireland, what is the most appropriate professional course of action for the ADI to take regarding their learner drivers preparing for the Kilkenny driving test? Option A. Advise learner drivers that their proximity to the test center examiner might be beneficial and subtly encourage them to book their test sooner rather than later. Option B. Focus solely on ensuring the learner drivers pass the test, even if it means accelerating their training beyond what is objectively necessary for safe driving. Option C. Transparently disclose the personal relationship to all learner drivers preparing for the Kilkenny driving test and ensure all training decisions are based solely on the learner's progress and readiness, with clear documentation. Option D. Maintain silence about the personal relationship, assuming it will not influence the test outcome and that the learner drivers are unaware. The correct answer is C. Transparently disclose the personal relationship to all learner drivers preparing for the Kilkenny driving test and ensure all training decisions are based solely on the learner's progress and readiness, with clear documentation. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential conflict of interest scenario involving a Kilkenny driver instructor. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires the instructor to balance their professional duty to provide objective training with their personal financial interests. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that the training provided is solely based on the learner's needs and progress, rather than being influenced by the instructor's desire to maximize lesson bookings. Strict adherence to the Road Safety Authority (RSA) guidelines for driver instruction in Ireland is paramount. The best professional approach involves transparently disclosing the relationship to the learner and ensuring that all training decisions are documented and justifiable based on the learner's skill development and readiness for the test. This approach upholds the instructor's ethical obligation to act in the learner's best interest and comply with RSA regulations regarding professional conduct and avoiding conflicts of interest. The focus remains on providing high-quality, unbiased instruction, ensuring the learner is genuinely prepared for the Kilkenny driving test, and maintaining the integrity of the driver licensing process. An incorrect approach would be to implicitly or explicitly suggest that additional lessons are required due to the instructor's personal connection to the test center, even if no objective need exists. This creates a perception of impropriety and could be interpreted as exploiting the learner's trust for financial gain, violating ethical standards, and potentially contravening RSA guidelines on professional conduct and fair practice. Another incorrect approach is to avoid any discussion of the relationship, hoping it goes unnoticed. This lack of transparency is a failure in professional duty. It prevents the learner from making informed decisions about their training and leaves the instructor vulnerable to accusations of undeclared conflicts of interest, undermining trust and professional reputation. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to prioritize the instructor's personal relationship over the learner's actual progress, pushing them towards the test before they are adequately prepared. This not only compromises the learner's safety and the integrity of the driving test, but also breaches the fundamental ethical responsibility of an instructor to ensure competence and safety on the road. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, objectivity, and adherence to regulatory guidelines. When a potential conflict of interest arises, the first step is to identify it clearly. The next step is to assess the potential impact on the client and the professional's obligations. If the conflict cannot be avoided or mitigated, disclosure and seeking guidance from regulatory bodies or professional associations are crucial. In this scenario, the instructor must always act in the learner's best interest, ensuring that all training decisions are objective and documented, and that any personal relationships are disclosed appropriately. Question 6. Risk assessment procedures indicate that an applicant for a Kilkenny driver test license renewal has disclosed a medical condition that could potentially affect their driving ability. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing authority? Option A. Authorize the applicant's general practitioner to make the final decision on license renewal without any further input or assessment from the licensing authority. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive assessment of the applicant's fitness to drive, obtaining detailed medical reports and consulting relevant NDLS guidelines before making a decision on license renewal. Option C. Refuse the license renewal outright based on the disclosure of the medical condition, without further medical evaluation. Option D. Immediately renew the driver's license, relying on the applicant's assurance that their condition does not impair their driving. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive assessment of the applicant's fitness to drive, obtaining detailed medical reports and consulting relevant NDLS guidelines before making a decision on license renewal. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver applying for a Kilkenny driver test license renewal. The challenge lies in balancing the applicant's desire to continue driving with the paramount responsibility of ensuring public safety, especially when a medical condition might impair driving ability. The professional must exercise careful judgment to avoid both undue restriction of an individual's mobility and the potential endangerment of others. The specific regulatory framework of Kilkenny, Ireland, mandates a proactive approach to assessing fitness to drive when medical conditions are present. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and documented assessment of the applicant's fitness to drive, taking into account the specific medical condition and its potential impact on driving. This approach requires obtaining detailed information from the applicant's treating physician, potentially requesting further medical evaluations, and consulting relevant guidelines from the National Driver Licence Service, NDLS, in Ireland regarding medical fitness to drive. The decision to grant, refuse, or impose conditions on the license renewal must be based on objective medical evidence and a clear understanding of the legal requirements for safe driving in Kilkenny. This aligns with the ethical duty to protect public safety and the regulatory obligation to ensure drivers meet the necessary health standards as outlined by Irish road traffic legislation and NDLS guidelines. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately renewing the license without further investigation, assuming the applicant's self-assessment of fitness is sufficient. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement to assess fitness to drive when a potentially impairing medical condition is disclosed, prioritizes administrative ease over public safety, and contravenes the ethical obligation to act responsibly when there is a known risk. Another incorrect approach is to summarily refuse the license renewal based solely on the applicant's disclosure of a medical condition, without conducting a proper assessment. This is discriminatory and fails to consider that many medical conditions can be managed or do not inherently render an individual unfit to drive. It bypasses the due process required by Irish law and NDLS guidelines, which emphasize individualized assessment. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the entire decision-making process to the applicant's general practitioner without independent verification or consideration of specific driving-related functional assessments. While the GP's opinion is valuable, the ultimate responsibility for determining fitness to drive rests with the licensing authority or its designated assessor, who must ensure all relevant factors are considered according to Irish regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should follow a structured decision-making process. First, acknowledge the applicant's disclosure and the potential implications for driving safety. Second, gather all necessary information, including detailed medical reports and, if required, functional driving assessments. Third, consult the relevant regulatory guidelines NDLS, Irish road traffic legislation, to understand the criteria for fitness to drive concerning the specific medical condition. Fourth, make a reasoned decision based on the evidence, documenting the rationale thoroughly. Finally, communicate the decision clearly to the applicant, outlining any conditions or reasons for refusal, and informing them of their appeal rights. Question 7. Market research demonstrates that many aspiring drivers in Kilkenny, Ireland, struggle to connect abstract road safety regulations with real-world driving scenarios. As a driving instructor, how should you best explain the implications of the Road Traffic Act 2010 concerning speed limits and safe following distances to a new learner? Option A. Read verbatim from the relevant sections of the Road Traffic Act 2010, emphasizing the legal penalties for noncompliance. Option B. Explain the regulations using clear, everyday language, providing specific examples of how these rules apply to common Kilkenny road types, e.g., urban streets, rural roads, motorways, and demonstrating the visual cues for maintaining safe distances. Option C. Focus primarily on the speed limits that are most frequently tested in the Kilkenny driving test, assuming the learner will pick up other nuances later. Option D. Use technical driving terminology and legal jargon, assuming the learner will understand these terms through context. The correct answer is B. Explain the regulations using clear, everyday language, providing specific examples of how these rules apply to common Kilkenny road types, e.g., urban streets, rural roads, motorways, and demonstrating the visual cues for maintaining safe distances. Explanation. Market research demonstrates that a significant portion of Kilkenny drivers are concerned about the clarity and accessibility of information regarding road safety regulations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driving instructor to balance the immediate need to impart essential knowledge with the long-term goal of fostering responsible driving habits, all while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing driver education in Kilkenny, Ireland. The instructor must consider how best to communicate complex information in a way that is both understandable and actionable for a diverse range of learners. The best approach involves tailoring the explanation of road safety regulations to the individual learner's comprehension level and learning style, using practical examples relevant to Kilkenny's road conditions. This is correct because it directly addresses the learner's needs, promotes deeper understanding beyond rote memorization, and aligns with the spirit of the Road Traffic Act 2010, Ireland, which emphasizes the importance of competent and informed drivers. By making the information relatable and digestible, the instructor enhances the likelihood that the learner will internalize and apply these regulations, contributing to safer roads in Kilkenny. An approach that solely relies on reciting the official wording of regulations without further explanation is professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the learner's potential difficulties in understanding legalistic language and does not fulfill the instructor's duty to ensure comprehension. It risks creating a driver who can pass a test but lacks true understanding of the underlying safety principles. Another unacceptable approach is to focus only on the most frequently tested regulations, neglecting others that are equally important for day-to-day safety in Kilkenny. This creates a knowledge gap and a false sense of preparedness, potentially leading to dangerous situations on the road. It prioritizes test passing over genuine safety competence. Finally, an approach that assumes all learners grasp technical driving terms and legal jargon without clarification is also flawed. This can lead to confusion and misinterpretation, undermining the effectiveness of the instruction and potentially leading to unsafe driving practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes learner-centric instruction. This involves assessing the learner's prior knowledge and learning preferences, adapting teaching methods accordingly, and consistently reinforcing the practical application of regulations in the context of Kilkenny's driving environment. The ultimate goal is to cultivate a safe and responsible driver, not just someone who can pass an examination. Question 8. Strategic planning requires a company operating in Ontario's transportation sector to consider the impact of proposed operational changes on its drivers. If a company is contemplating a new scheduling system that could significantly alter driver hours and routes, what is the most responsible and legally compliant approach to managing this change from a stakeholder perspective? Option A. Implement the new scheduling system immediately to gain efficiency benefits, and then address any driver concerns that arise afterward. Option B. Inform drivers of the new scheduling system through a company-wide memo, stating it is a final decision and offering a brief queue and a session. Option C. Initiate early and open dialogue with driver representatives to discuss the proposed changes, gather feedback, and collaboratively explore potential adjustments to mitigate negative impacts. Option D. Conduct a survey of drivers to gauge their general satisfaction with current schedules, without specifically detailing the proposed changes, and use this data to justify the new system. The correct answer is C. Initiate early and open dialogue with driver representatives to discuss the proposed changes, gather feedback, and collaboratively explore potential adjustments to mitigate negative impacts. Explanation. Strategic planning requires careful consideration of various stakeholder interests, especially in the context of a regulated industry like transportation in Ontario. The scenario presents a challenge because a proposed operational change, while potentially beneficial for the company's efficiency, could negatively impact a key stakeholder group, the drivers. Balancing the company's financial objectives with the well-being and rights of its drivers is paramount. The best approach involves proactive and transparent engagement with the driver's representatives. This means initiating discussions early in the planning process, sharing the proposed changes, and actively seeking their input and feedback. This collaborative strategy aligns with principles of good corporate governance and labor relations, which are implicitly encouraged by Ontario's employment and labor laws that emphasize fair treatment and consultation. By involving drivers in the decision-making process, the company can identify potential issues, explore alternative solutions that mitigate negative impacts, and foster a sense of trust and cooperation. This approach is most likely to lead to a sustainable and mutually beneficial outcome, respecting the rights and contributions of the drivers. An approach that focuses solely on implementing the changes without prior consultation with drivers or their representatives is procedurally unfair and ethically questionable. Such an action could violate implied terms of employment or collective bargaining agreements, depending on the driver's employment status, and would certainly damage employee morale and trust. This failure to consult can lead to grievances, disputes, and potential legal challenges under Ontario's labor legislation. Another unacceptable approach is to present the changes as a fait accompli, offering minimal opportunity for genuine feedback or negotiation. This demonstrates a lack of respect for the driver's perspective and their role in the company's operations. It signals that their concerns are secondary to the company's immediate goals, which can breed resentment and resistance, potentially leading to industrial action or a decline in service quality. Finally, an approach that involves making superficial inquiries about driver sentiment without a genuine commitment to incorporating their feedback into the final decision is also problematic. This is a form of tokenism and can be perceived as disingenuous by the drivers, further eroding trust. While it might appear to meet a minimum standard of consultation, it fails to uphold the spirit of collaborative problem-solving and can lead to the same negative consequences as outright non-consultation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes stakeholder analysis, ethical considerations, and regulatory compliance. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders, understanding their interests and potential impacts, and then developing strategies that are both legally sound and ethically responsible. Open communication, transparency, and a willingness to negotiate and compromise are key elements of effective stakeholder management in a regulated environment. Question 9. The assessment process reveals that a new driver in Ontario is approaching a cyclist on a narrow road. The cyclist is riding near the right edge of the lane, but there is some gravel and debris in that area. What is the most responsible and legally compliant approach for the driver to take? Option A. Honk the horn to alert the cyclist of the approaching vehicle and encourage them to move further to the right. Option B. Pass the cyclist as quickly as possible to minimize the time spent in close proximity, even if it means a slightly tighter passing distance. Option C. Pass the cyclist at the minimum legal distance, assuming the cyclist will maintain their position at the far right of the lane. Option D. Slow down significantly, increase the passing distance to well beyond the legal minimum, and be prepared to wait for a safer opportunity to pass if the cyclist's position or road conditions make a safe pass impossible. Correct answer is D. Slow down significantly, increase the passing distance to well beyond the legal minimum, and be prepared to wait for a safer opportunity to pass if the cyclist's position or road conditions make a safe pass impossible. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge for new drivers in Ontario. Understanding the nuances of road sharing with vulnerable road users, particularly cyclists. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to not only apply learned rules, but also to exercise proactive judgment and empathy in dynamic situations. The potential for serious harm to cyclists necessitates a high degree of caution and awareness. The best approach involves a proactive and defensive driving strategy that prioritizes the safety of cyclists. This means anticipating potential cyclist movements, maintaining a safe passing distance, and being prepared to adjust speed or position to avoid conflict. Specifically, this involves actively scanning for cyclists, understanding their typical road positioning, and yielding appropriately when necessary, even if it means a slight delay. This aligns with the Ontario Highway Traffic Act's general duty to drive with care and attention, and to avoid anything that could endanger other users of the highway. It also reflects the ethical imperative to protect vulnerable road users. An approach that focuses solely on adhering to the minimum legal passing distance without actively scanning for cyclists or anticipating their movements is insufficient. While the legal distance is a minimum requirement, it does not account for unpredictable cyclist behavior or road conditions, leading to a failure to drive with reasonable care and attention, potentially endangering others. Another unacceptable approach is to assume cyclists will always stay to the far right of the lane. While this is often the case, cyclists may need to move within the lane for safety reasons, e.g., to avoid road hazards like potholes or debris, or to prepare for turns. Failing to recognize this possibility and adjust accordingly demonstrates a lack of attentiveness and can lead to dangerous situations. Finally, an approach that prioritizes driver convenience over cyclist safety, such as passing a cyclist only when it is most convenient for the driver, even if it means a less safe maneuver, is ethically and legally unsound. This demonstrates a disregard for the safety of other road users and violates the fundamental principles of responsible driving. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes risk assessment and mitigation. This involves 1. Identifying potential hazards, e.g., presence of cyclists. 2. Assessing the risk associated with each hazard, e.g., proximity, speed, road conditions. 3. Implementing control measures to mitigate the risk, e.g., slowing down, increasing passing distance, scanning. 4. Continuously monitoring the situation and adjusting actions as needed. This proactive and safety-first mindset is crucial for navigating complex road interactions. Question 10. The evaluation methodology shows that a driver training school in Ontario is considering purchasing 5 new training vehicles. The total upfront cost for these vehicles is $150,000. The school estimates that each vehicle will generate an additional $15,000 in net revenue per year after accounting for fuel, insurance, and minor maintenance. The vehicles are expected to have a useful life of 5 years, after which they can be sold for an estimated $5,000 each. The school's required rate of return is 10%. What is the net present value, NPV, of this investment, and what does it indicate about the financial viability of purchasing the vehicles? Option A. The NPV is approximately $150,000. This NPV indicates that the investment will at least break even, covering the initial outlay. Option B. The NPV is approximately $20,468. This positive NPV indicates that the investment is financially viable and is expected to generate returns exceeding the school's required rate of return. Option C. The NPV is approximately $75,000. This NPV represents the total net revenue generated over 5 years, suggesting the investment is profitable. Option D. The NPV is approximately $20,468. This negative NPV indicates that the investment is financially unviable and is expected to generate returns below the school's required rate of return. The correct answer is B. The NPV is approximately $20,468. This positive NPV indicates that the investment is financially viable and is expected to generate returns exceeding the school's required rate of return. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that understanding the financial implications of operational decisions is crucial for a driver training school operating in Ontario, Canada. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate cost of acquiring new training vehicles against the potential long-term revenue generation and the need to maintain compliance with Ontario's Ministry of Transportation, MTO, regulations for driver training providers. A driver training school must make informed financial decisions that support its operational capacity and profitability while adhering to provincial standards. The best approach involves a thorough financial analysis that considers the total cost of ownership and the projected return on investment. This includes calculating the depreciation of the vehicles, the ongoing costs of maintenance, insurance, and fuel, as well as estimating the increased student capacity and potential revenue generated by the new vehicles. By using a discounted cash flow (DCF) analysis, the school can accurately assess the present value of future earnings and compare it to the initial investment, ensuring the decision aligns with sound financial principles and MTO operational requirements. This method provides a robust framework for evaluating the financial viability of the capital expenditure. An approach that focuses solely on the initial purchase price of the vehicles without considering the total cost of ownership or potential revenue is professionally unacceptable. This oversight fails to account for the significant ongoing expenses associated with operating a fleet, which can negatively impact profitability and cash flow. Furthermore, neglecting to project the revenue-generating capacity of the new vehicles means the decision is not based on a comprehensive understanding of its financial impact. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to prioritize the cheapest available vehicles without regard for their suitability for driver training or their long-term reliability. While cost is a factor, using vehicles that are not fit for purpose or are prone to frequent breakdowns can lead to increased maintenance costs, student dissatisfaction, and potential noncompliance with MTO safety standards. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to consider the operational and regulatory implications. Finally, making the decision based on anecdotal evidence or the purchasing habits of competitors without conducting an independent financial analysis is also professionally unsound. While market research can be informative, it does not replace the need for a rigorous, data-driven assessment tailored to the specific financial situation and strategic goals of the school. This can lead to suboptimal financial outcomes and missed opportunities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objective e.g., increasing student capacity by 20%. This should be followed by gathering relevant financial data, purchase price, operating costs, projected revenue. Next, appropriate financial modeling techniques, such as DCF analysis, should be applied to evaluate the investment's profitability and risk. Finally, the results should be compared against predefined financial benchmarks and strategic goals before making a final decision. Question 11. Analysis of a prospective taxi driver's application for a license in Kilkenny reveals a past conviction for a non-driving related offense. Considering the regulatory framework governing taxi services in Kilkenny, which of the following actions best represents the appropriate professional response to ensure compliance and uphold public trust? Option A. Automatically reject the application, assuming any past conviction renders the applicant unsuitable for a taxi license. Option B. Proceed with the application without further investigation into the conviction, as it was not driving related. Option C. Advise the applicant to omit any mention of the conviction from their application to avoid complications. Option D. Thoroughly assess the conviction against the Kilkenny County Council's taxi licensing bylaws and relevant Irish legislation to determine its impact on the applicant's eligibility, potentially seeking clarification from the licensing authority. The correct answer is D. Thoroughly assess the conviction against the Kilkenny County Council's taxi licensing bylaws and relevant Irish legislation to determine its impact on the applicant's eligibility, potentially seeking clarification from the licensing authority. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver applying for a Kilkenny taxi license. The core difficulty lies in balancing the applicant's desire to operate a taxi service with the stringent regulatory requirements designed to ensure public safety and trust. The applicant's past conviction, while not directly related to driving, raises concerns about their suitability and adherence to rules, which is a critical aspect of being a licensed taxi operator in Kilkenny. Careful judgment is required to assess the risk and determine if the applicant meets the standards set by the Kilkenny County Council's taxi licensing authority. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough and transparent assessment of the applicant's past conviction against the specific criteria outlined in the Kilkenny County Council's taxi licensing bylaws and relevant Irish legislation governing taxi services. This approach prioritizes adherence to the regulatory framework by directly addressing whether the conviction, as defined by law, disqualifies the applicant or requires specific conditions to be met. It involves seeking clarification from the licensing authority on how such convictions are evaluated, potentially requiring the applicant to provide evidence of rehabilitation or demonstrating that the conviction does not impact their ability to operate a taxi service safely and ethically. This aligns with the principle of upholding public safety and regulatory integrity, ensuring that all licensed drivers meet the established standards for trustworthiness and responsibility. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that any past conviction, regardless of its nature or recency, automatically disqualifies the applicant. This fails to acknowledge that licensing regulations often have specific provisions for evaluating past offenses, considering factors like the type of offense, the time elapsed, and evidence of rehabilitation. Such an assumption bypasses the due process and the specific criteria set by the Kilkenny County Council. Another incorrect approach is to overlook the conviction entirely and proceed with the application as if it were not a factor. This is a serious ethical and regulatory failure. It undermines the integrity of the licensing process, potentially placing the public at risk by licensing an individual who may not meet the required standards of character and trustworthiness. It also violates the obligation to provide accurate information to the licensing authority. A third incorrect approach is to advise the applicant to withhold information about the conviction, hoping it will not be discovered. This is fundamentally dishonest and unethical. It constitutes a breach of trust with the licensing authority and the public, and if discovered, would likely lead to immediate disqualification and potential legal repercussions. It directly contravenes the principle of transparency and good character required for a taxi license. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should follow a structured decision-making process. First, they must identify and understand the specific regulatory requirements of the Kilkenny County Council's taxi licensing authority and any relevant Irish legislation. Second, they should gather all relevant facts about the applicant's situation, including the nature and circumstances of the conviction. Third, they should consult the official guidelines and bylaws to determine how such convictions are assessed. If there is ambiguity, seeking direct clarification from the licensing authority is crucial. The decision should always be guided by the principles of public safety, regulatory compliance, and ethical conduct, ensuring that the applicant's suitability is assessed fairly and transparently against established criteria. Question 12. The review process indicates that a driver in Ontario is experiencing significant delays in the reinstatement of their license due to outstanding documentation. The driver, who has a personal acquaintance with a licensing official, has expressed frustration and implied that a favor could be reciprocated in the future if the process is expedited. Considering the regulatory framework of Ontario, which of the following actions best upholds professional conduct and legal compliance? Option A. Inform the driver that their license cannot be reinstated until all required documentation is submitted and verified, without offering any further assistance or explanation of the process. Option B. Suggest to the driver that they offer a gratuity or a future favor in exchange for prioritizing their application, as this might motivate the relevant department to act faster. Option C. Proceed with a thorough and impartial review of the driver's application and supporting documentation, strictly adhering to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and its associated regulations, and communicate the required steps and timelines clearly to the driver. Option D. Expedite the license reinstatement process by overlooking minor discrepancies in the submitted documentation, given the personal acquaintance and the implied future benefit. The correct answer is C. Proceed with a thorough and impartial review of the driver's application and supporting documentation, strictly adhering to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and its associated regulations, and communicate the required steps and timelines clearly to the driver. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential conflict of interest and a breach of professional conduct regarding the handling of client information and the driver's licensing process in Ontario. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the driver's desire for a quick resolution with the strict legal and ethical obligations of the licensing authority. The pressure to expedite a process that has clear procedural safeguards can lead to compromised decision-making. The best approach involves a thorough and impartial review of the driver's application and supporting documentation, adhering strictly to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and its associated regulations. This includes verifying all submitted information, conducting necessary assessments, and ensuring compliance with all eligibility criteria before any license is issued or reinstated. This approach is correct because it upholds the integrity of the licensing system, prioritizes public safety by ensuring only qualified individuals are licensed, and complies with the legal framework established by the Ontario government. It demonstrates a commitment to due process and fairness for all applicants, regardless of their perceived urgency. An approach that involves bypassing standard verification procedures based on a personal relationship or a promise of future business is professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a conflict of interest and a violation of ethical guidelines that prohibit favoritism and the misuse of one's position. Such an action would undermine public trust in the licensing authority and could lead to the issuance of licenses to unqualified individuals, posing a significant risk to road safety. Furthermore, it would contravene the principles of fairness and equal treatment mandated by administrative law and the Ontario Human Rights Code, which requires all individuals to be treated equitably under the law. Another unacceptable approach would be to dismiss the driver's concerns without a proper investigation or explanation. This demonstrates a lack of professionalism and could lead to a perception of arbitrary decision-making. It fails to address the underlying issues that may have led to the driver's situation and does not provide the driver with a clear understanding of the requirements for licensing. This approach neglects the duty of care owed to applicants and can result in unnecessary frustration and legal challenges. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established laws and regulations, maintains impartiality, and ensures transparency in all dealings. This involves understanding the specific requirements of the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, recognizing and managing potential conflicts of interest, and communicating clearly and respectfully with all stakeholders. When faced with pressure or unusual circumstances, professionals must rely on established procedures and seek guidance from supervisors or legal counsel if necessary, rather than deviating from mandated protocols. Question 13. Performance analysis shows a concerning rise in near-miss incidents involving commercial drivers operating within Kilkenny, Ireland. Considering the various stakeholders involved in road safety, which of the following strategies would be most effective in addressing this trend while upholding regulatory compliance and ethical considerations? Option A. Conduct a detailed review of driver training records and near-miss reports, and initiate direct consultations with drivers to gather first-hand accounts and identify contributing factors to the incidents. Option B. Mandate a comprehensive, company-wide retraining program for all commercial drivers in Kilkenny, focusing on general road safety principles, without prior identification of specific training gaps. Option C. Rely exclusively on fleet managers' assessments of the near-miss data to implement operational changes and driver performance evaluations. Option D. Immediately implement stricter enforcement measures and increased fines for all commercial drivers in Kilkenny, regardless of individual circumstances, to deter future near misses. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed review of driver training records and near-miss reports, and initiate direct consultations with drivers to gather first-hand accounts and identify contributing factors to the incidents. Explanation. Performance analysis shows a significant increase in reported near-miss incidents involving commercial drivers in Kilkenny, Ireland, over the past quarter. These incidents, while not resulting in accidents, highlight potential systemic issues in driver training or adherence to road safety regulations. The challenge lies in identifying the root causes and implementing effective preventative measures without unduly penalizing drivers or disrupting essential transport services. A thorough investigation requires understanding the perspectives of various stakeholders, including drivers, fleet managers, and regulatory bodies, to ensure a balanced and effective response. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of driver training records and incident reports, coupled with direct engagement with drivers to understand their experiences and identify contributing factors. This method prioritizes data-driven insights and collaborative problem-solving, aligning with the road safety authorities' RSA mandate to improve road safety through education and enforcement. By actively seeking driver input, it fosters a culture of safety and allows for the identification of practical solutions that address real-world challenges faced by commercial drivers in Kilkenny. This aligns with the ethical obligation to ensure safe working conditions and the regulatory requirement to maintain high standards of road safety. An approach that focuses solely on increasing penalties for drivers without investigating the underlying causes is flawed. This punitive measure fails to address potential systemic issues in training or vehicle maintenance and can lead to a climate of fear, discouraging drivers from reporting genuine safety concerns. It also overlooks the possibility that external factors, such as road infrastructure or traffic congestion, may be contributing to the near misses. Another unacceptable approach would be to implement mandatory, one-size-fits-all retraining for all drivers based on the aggregate data, without first identifying specific areas of weakness or individual driver needs. This is inefficient, costly, and may not effectively target the actual causes of the near misses. It also fails to acknowledge the diverse experiences and skill levels within the driver pool. Finally, an approach that relies solely on fleet managers' interpretations of the data without direct driver consultation risks missing crucial on-the-ground information. Fleet managers may have a vested interest in minimizing perceived operational disruptions, potentially leading to a biased assessment of the situation. Professionals should adopt a systematic decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the problem and its scope. This involves gathering objective data, consulting with all relevant stakeholders, and considering multiple perspectives. Solutions should be evidence-based, proportionate, and aligned with regulatory requirements and ethical principles. Continuous monitoring and evaluation are essential to ensure the effectiveness of implemented measures. Question 14. Operational review demonstrates that a commercial driver operating a delivery vehicle in Ontario experiences an unusual grinding noise from the braking system during a routine delivery. The driver is on a tight schedule, and the noise does not appear to be significantly impacting the vehicle's ability to stop, though it is concerning. What is the most appropriate course of action for the driver to take? Option A. Immediately stop the vehicle in a safe location and report the issue to their supervisor or the appropriate maintenance personnel. Option B. Ignore the noise as it does not appear to be immediately affecting the vehicle's stopping power and continue with the delivery. Option C. Attempt to diagnose the cause of the noise and make a temporary adjustment to the braking system to see if the noise subsides. Option D. Continue the delivery route as planned, making a note to report the braking noise to maintenance upon completion of the day's deliveries. The correct answer is A. Immediately stop the vehicle in a safe location and report the issue to their supervisor or the appropriate maintenance personnel. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to balance immediate operational demands with the overarching safety regulations of Ontario. The driver is under pressure to complete a delivery, which could tempt them to overlook potential safety issues. The core challenge lies in the driver's responsibility to assess risk proactively and act in accordance with the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, even when it might cause a minor delay. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing the immediate safety of the vehicle and other road users. This approach correctly identifies that a potentially compromised braking system, even if not completely failed, poses an unacceptable risk. The driver's immediate action to stop the vehicle safely and report the issue aligns with the fundamental duty of care mandated by Ontario's traffic laws, which emphasize safe operation and the prevention of accidents. This proactive stance prevents potential harm and avoids contravening regulations that hold drivers accountable for operating unsafe vehicles. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves continuing the journey with the intention of reporting the issue upon arrival. This is a significant regulatory failure, as it knowingly operates a vehicle with a potential safety defect, directly contravening the Ontario Highway Traffic Act's provisions regarding vehicle maintenance and safe operation. It places other road users at undue risk. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the noise as minor and continue without further inspection. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adhere to the principle of risk assessment. The Ontario Highway Traffic Act requires drivers to ensure their vehicle is in a safe operating condition, and ignoring a warning sign like unusual braking noise is a breach of this responsibility. Finally, attempting to self-diagnose or temporarily fix the issue without proper training or tools is also an unacceptable approach. This could exacerbate the problem, create a false sense of security, or lead to further damage, all while the vehicle remains potentially unsafe to operate. This bypasses the established procedures for vehicle maintenance and repair, which are implicitly governed by safety standards within Ontario's regulatory framework. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance above all else. This involves 1. Recognizing potential hazards, identifying any unusual sounds, smells, or vehicle behavior. 2. Assessing risk, evaluating the severity of the potential hazard and its impact on safety. 3. Consulting regulations, understanding the relevant legal requirements for vehicle operation and maintenance. 4. Taking appropriate action, implementing the safest course of action, which may involve stopping, reporting, or seeking professional assistance, even if it causes inconvenience. 5. Documenting actions, keeping a record of the issue and the steps taken. Question 15. Investigation of a driver's decision-making process when experiencing significant fatigue while operating a vehicle on a provincial highway in Ontario. What is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action? Option A. Consume a strong caffeinated beverage to overcome the fatigue and continue driving. Option B. Pull over to the side of the road for a brief nap before continuing the journey. Option C. Continue driving to the nearest town, believing they can manage the fatigue for a short period. Option D. Immediately cease driving and arrange for safe alternative transportation to reach their destination. Correct answer is D. Immediately cease driving and arrange for safe alternative transportation to reach their destination. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with the overarching responsibility to public safety and adherence to traffic regulations in Ontario. The temptation to prioritize personal convenience over safety protocols, especially when fatigued, presents a significant ethical and regulatory dilemma. Careful judgment is required to recognize the inherent risks associated with impaired driving and to make a decision that upholds the law and protects others. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately ceasing all driving activities and arranging for alternative transportation. This approach directly addresses the core risk of impaired driving by eliminating the hazard entirely. In Ontario, the Highway Traffic Act and provincial regulations strictly prohibit driving while impaired by fatigue or any other substance that affects driving ability. This proactive measure demonstrates a commitment to public safety, legal compliance, and ethical responsibility, aligning with the fundamental principles of safe road use. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing to drive, even for a short distance, while experiencing significant fatigue is a direct violation of Ontario's Highway Traffic Act. Fatigue impairs reaction time, judgment, and awareness, making driving unsafe and increasing the risk of accidents. This approach disregards the legal prohibition against driving when unfit and demonstrates a failure to prioritize public safety. Pulling over to the side of the road for a brief nap, without considering the location's safety or potential hazards, is also problematic. While it acknowledges fatigue, it does not eliminate the risk of driving while impaired. Furthermore, depending on the location, stopping on the shoulder of a busy highway can create a new hazard for other motorists. This approach fails to fully mitigate the risk and may introduce new safety concerns. Attempting to push through the fatigue by consuming stimulants like caffeine is a dangerous and legally unsound strategy. While caffeine may temporarily mask the symptoms of fatigue, it does not eliminate the underlying impairment. Ontario law does not provide exemptions for driving while fatigued, regardless of attempts to combat it with stimulants. This approach demonstrates a misunderstanding of the physiological effects of fatigue and a disregard for the law. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Identifying the hazard fatigue impairing driving ability. 2. Assessing the risk, high probability of accident and legal consequences. 3. Evaluating control measures, stopping driving, arranging alternative transport, resting safely. 4. Implementing the most effective control measure, ceasing driving and securing safe alternative transport. 5. Reviewing the decision, confirming safety and legality. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are grounded in safety, legality, and ethical considerations. Question 16. Comparative studies suggest that drivers in Ontario facing personal discomfort or urgency may be tempted to compromise on immediate safety protocols. If a driver begins to feel significantly unwell while operating a vehicle on Highway 401 near Toronto, what is the most responsible course of action? Option A. Pull over immediately on the shoulder of the highway, even if it is a high-traffic area, to rest for a few minutes. Option B. Pull over to the nearest safe location, away from traffic lanes, to assess the situation and determine the next steps. Option C. Ignore the symptoms and focus intently on reaching the destination, believing that concentration will compensate for the discomfort. Option D. Continue driving to the intended destination as quickly as possible to avoid further discomfort. The correct answer is B. Pull over to the nearest safe location, away from traffic lanes, to assess the situation and determine the next steps. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with the overarching responsibility to public safety and adherence to traffic regulations in Ontario. The pressure to reach a destination quickly, coupled with the potential for personal discomfort. Cloud judgment. Careful consideration of the immediate risks versus the consequences of noncompliance is paramount. The best professional approach involves prioritizing safety and regulatory compliance above all else. This means recognizing that the driver's current condition, feeling unwell, presents a potential risk to themselves and other road users. The correct course of action is to pull over to a safe location as soon as possible, away from active traffic lanes, and assess the situation. This might involve resting, calling for assistance, or seeking medical attention if symptoms worsen. This approach aligns with the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, which implicitly requires drivers to operate their vehicles safely and to avoid actions that could endanger others. Ethically, it reflects a commitment to the well-being of the community. An incorrect approach would be to continue driving despite feeling unwell, hoping to reach the destination quickly. This disregards the potential for impaired driving ability, which could lead to an accident. Such an action would violate the fundamental duty of care owed to other road users and contravenes the spirit, if not the letter, of traffic safety laws in Ontario. Another incorrect approach is to pull over in an unsafe location, such as the shoulder of a busy highway or an intersection. While stopping is a good initial step, doing so in a manner that creates a hazard for other vehicles or for oneself is unacceptable. This demonstrates a failure to properly assess the immediate environment and prioritize safety even when stopped. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to ignore the symptoms and continue driving without any consideration for personal well-being or the potential impact on driving performance. This shows a lack of responsibility and a disregard for the potential consequences of operating a vehicle while impaired by illness. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with self-assessment of fitness to drive. If there is any doubt about one's ability to operate a vehicle safely due to illness, fatigue, or any other factor, the default decision should be not to drive or to pull over immediately to a safe location. This framework prioritizes safety, regulatory compliance, and ethical responsibility to the public. Question 17. The investigation demonstrates that a Kilkenny County Council traffic warden has observed Mr. Henderson parking his vehicle in a designated disabled bay on multiple occasions without displaying a valid blue badge. Mr. Henderson claims he has a valid badge, but occasionally forgets to display it. What is the most appropriate course of action for the council to take? Option A. Verify the existence of a valid blue badge for Mr. Henderson's vehicle through council records, and if none is found or if the badge is expired, proceed with issuing a penalty charge notice in accordance with the relevant parking bylaws. Option B. Immediately issue a penalty charge notice without attempting to verify the existence or validity of Mr. Henderson's blue badge. Option C. Advise Mr. Henderson to obtain a blue badge if he believes he is eligible and disregard the current observations. Option D. Accept Mr. Henderson's verbal assurance that he possesses a valid blue badge and issue a warning, advising him to be more careful in the future. Correct answer is A. Verify the existence of a valid blue badge for Mr. Henderson's vehicle through council records, and if none is found or if the badge is expired, proceed with issuing a penalty charge notice in accordance with the relevant parking bylaws. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a driver, Mr. Henderson, has been observed by a Kilkenny County Council traffic warden to be repeatedly parking in a disabled bay without displaying a valid blue badge. This situation is professionally challenging because it involves balancing the need to enforce parking regulations for the benefit of those with disabilities against potential mitigating circumstances or misunderstandings by the driver. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness and adherence to the law. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented investigation that prioritizes the evidence of non-compliance with the Kilkenny County Council's parking bylaws regarding disabled bays. This approach would involve reviewing the traffic warden's initial observation, checking council records for any registered blue badge associated with the vehicle's registration number, and if no valid badge is found, proceeding with the issuance of a penalty charge notice, PCN, in accordance with the relevant legislation governing parking enforcement in Ireland. This is correct because it directly addresses the observed violation, relies on verifiable data, council records, and follows the established legal procedure for issuing a PCN, thereby upholding the integrity of disabled parking provisions. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the observation based on the driver's verbal assurance that they have a blue badge without independent verification. This is professionally unacceptable, as it bypasses the established verification process and relies solely on an uncorroborated claim, potentially undermining the enforcement of disabled bay regulations and allowing unauthorized use. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately issue a PCN without first attempting to verify the existence of a valid blue badge through council records. While enforcement is necessary, a reasonable investigative step would be to confirm the absence of a valid badge before issuing a penalty, demonstrating due diligence. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to accept a vague explanation from the driver about forgetting to display the badge without any attempt to confirm the badge's validity or the frequency of such occurrences. This approach lacks the necessary rigor to ensure compliance and prevent potential abuse of disabled parking facilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with objective observation and evidence gathering. This is followed by a verification step using available official records. Only after confirming noncompliance through verified evidence should enforcement actions be initiated, ensuring that all decisions are transparent, justifiable, and in line with regulatory requirements and ethical considerations for fair enforcement. Question 18. Assessment of a driver's response to a dashboard warning light indicating a potential brake system malfunction while operating a vehicle on Highway 401 in Ontario. Option A. Attempt to feather the brakes gently to avoid triggering the warning light further, hoping the issue resolves itself. Option B. Continue driving to the nearest planned destination, assuming the warning light might be a false alarm and the brakes will hold. Option C. Drive at a reduced speed, relying more on engine braking and anticipating stops further in advance, while continuing towards the destination. Option D. Safely pull over to the shoulder, turn on hazard lights, and contact roadside assistance or a mechanic to assess and repair the issue before continuing the journey. Correct answer is D. Safely pull over to the shoulder, turn on hazard lights, and contact roadside assistance or a mechanic to assess and repair the issue before continuing the journey. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with their legal and ethical obligations to road safety and other road users in Ontario. The temptation to prioritize personal convenience over safety protocols is a common pitfall, demanding careful judgment and adherence to established regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately ceasing operation of the vehicle and addressing the mechanical issue before continuing the journey. This approach aligns with the Highway Traffic Act of Ontario, which mandates that all vehicles must be maintained in a safe operating condition. Specifically, Section 10 of the Act requires drivers to ensure their vehicle is in good working order. By stopping and assessing the problem, the driver upholds their responsibility to prevent potential hazards, such as brake failure or loss of control, which could endanger themselves and others. This proactive measure demonstrates a commitment to public safety and regulatory compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing to drive with a suspected brake issue is a direct violation of the Highway Traffic Act of Ontario. This failure to ensure the vehicle is in safe operating condition creates an unacceptable risk of accident. Ignoring the warning light and the unusual noise, and instead proceeding to a destination, demonstrates a disregard for the potential consequences and the safety of other road users. Furthermore, attempting to push through a mechanical problem without proper diagnosis and repair is an ethically unsound decision, prioritizing personal convenience over the well-being of the community. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance above all else. When faced with a potential mechanical defect, the immediate step should be to safely pull over, assess the situation, and if the vehicle is not in a safe operating condition, cease driving and seek professional repair. This framework emphasizes a proactive approach to risk management, ensuring that personal needs never supersede the legal and ethical imperative to operate a vehicle safely. Question 19. Compliance review shows that a driver operating a commercial vehicle in London, UK, has identified a minor but persistent issue with the vehicle's braking system that is not currently preventing the vehicle from stopping, but is noticeable during operation. The driver has a time-sensitive delivery to complete within the next hour. What is the most appropriate course of action according to UK road traffic regulations and best practice? Option A. Immediately cease operation of the vehicle and arrange for the braking system to be inspected and repaired before continuing any journey. Option B. Proceed with the delivery but drive with extreme caution, anticipating longer stopping distances due to the braking issue. Option C. Contact the depot manager to request permission to continue the delivery, explaining the minor nature of the braking issue. Option D. Continue with the delivery, as the braking system is still functional and the issue is minor, intending to have it checked after the delivery is completed. Correct answer is A. Immediately cease operation of the vehicle and arrange for the braking system to be inspected and repaired before continuing any journey. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to balance immediate personal convenience with the strict regulatory requirements for vehicle safety and public roadworthiness. The temptation to defer a known safety issue for a minor inconvenience is a common pitfall, demanding a driver's commitment to compliance even when it's inconvenient. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately addressing the issue by ceasing operation and arranging for the necessary repairs. This approach aligns directly with the Road Traffic Act 1988, as amended, and associated regulations in the UK, which place a clear duty on drivers to ensure their vehicles are in a roadworthy condition at all times. Failing to do so can result in penalties and, more importantly, compromises public safety. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to legal compliance and responsible vehicle operation. Incorrect approach is analysis. Deferring the repair until after the delivery, even with the intention of fixing it later, constitutes a failure to ensure the vehicle is roadworthy at the time of operation. This directly contravenes the spirit and letter of road traffic legislation, which mandates that vehicles must be maintained in a condition that does not pose a danger to the driver or other road users. Continuing to drive with a known defect, regardless of its perceived severity or the urgency of a delivery, is a regulatory failure. Similarly, assuming the defect is minor and will not be noticed is a dangerous assumption that bypasses the legal obligation to proactively ensure roadworthiness. The law does not permit drivers to self-assess the risk of a defect. It requires it to be rectified. Professional reasoning. Professionals in driving roles must adopt a risk-averse and compliance-first mindset. When a potential safety or roadworthiness issue is identified, the immediate priority should be to assess its impact on the vehicle's legal compliance and safety. This involves consulting relevant regulations and, if in doubt, erring on the side of caution. A robust decision-making process would involve 1. Identifying the potential issue. 2. Consulting the relevant legislation, e.g., Road Traffic Act 1988, Construction and Use Regulations. 3. Determining if the issue compromises roadworthiness or safety. 4. If roadworthiness is compromised, ceasing operation and arranging for repair. 5. Documenting the issue and the actions taken. This systematic approach ensures that personal convenience never overrides legal obligations and public safety. Question 20. Regulatory review indicates that a driver in Kilkenny is considering their vehicle insurance options. They are presented with two policies. Policy A has an annual premium of Euros 600 and a deductible of Euros 1,000. Policy B has an annual premium of Euros 900 and a deductible of Euros 500. Based on their driving history and local accident statistics, the driver estimates a 5% probability of being involved in an accident requiring a claim in the next year. Assuming the average cost of repairs for an accident is Euros 3,000, which insurance policy represents the lower total expected annual cost for the driver. Option A. Policy B, as the higher premium is justified by the increased coverage and peace of mind it provides. Option B. Policy A, as its total expected annual cost is Euros 750, which is lower than Policy B's expected cost. Option C. Policy A, because the lower annual premium is the primary factor in minimizing overall cost. Option D. Policy B, as its lower deductible significantly reduces potential out-of-pocket expenses in case of an accident. The correct answer is B. Policy A, as its total expected annual cost is Euros 750, which is lower than Policy B's expected cost. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for drivers in Kilkenny. managing the financial implications of potential vehicle damage and the associated insurance costs. Professional challenge lies in accurately assessing risk and making informed decisions about insurance coverage that are both financially prudent and compliant with legal requirements. This requires a nuanced understanding of insurance principles and the ability to apply them to a specific financial situation. The correct approach involves a thorough calculation of the potential costs versus the benefits of different insurance levels. This includes factoring in the deductible, the annual premium, and the probability of an accident by comparing the total expected cost of being underinsured, premium plus potential out-of-pocket expenses, against the total expected cost of being fully insured, higher premium. A driver can make an evidence-based decision. This aligns with the ethical principle of responsible financial management and the legal requirement to be adequately insured as per Kilkenny's road traffic regulations, which mandate a minimum level of third-party liability insurance. The calculation demonstrates a proactive and informed approach to risk management, ensuring that the driver is not only compliant, but also protected against potentially ruinous financial consequences. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on minimizing the upfront cost by selecting the lowest possible premium without considering the deductible or the potential for significant out-of-pocket expenses in the event of an accident. This fails to adequately assess the true financial risk and could lead to severe financial hardship if an incident occurs. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting oneself and potentially others from financial harm. Another incorrect approach is to opt for the highest level of coverage simply because it offers the most protection, without performing a cost-benefit analysis. While seemingly safe, this can lead to overspending on insurance premiums that do not offer a proportionate increase in value or security, especially if the driver has a low-risk profile or a history of safe driving. This represents a failure in efficient financial resource allocation. A further incorrect approach is to rely on anecdotal advice or the choices of other drivers without conducting personal research or calculations. Insurance needs are highly individualized, and what is appropriate for one driver may not be for another. This approach lacks the rigor necessary for sound financial decision-making and can lead to suboptimal coverage. The professional reasoning process for such a situation should involve 1. Identifying the core financial objective, e.g., minimizing total expected cost of risk. 2. Gathering all relevant data, premium costs, deductible amounts, estimated repair costs, probability of claims. 3. Applying appropriate mathematical models to calculate expected costs for different scenarios. 4. Evaluating the results against personal financial capacity and risk tolerance. 5. Making a decision that balances cost, coverage, and compliance with Kilkenny's regulations.